You know the typical story of Silicon Valley, right? Garages, brilliant minds, late nights, a lot of coffee, and then boom, the digital revolution. But what if I told you there's another layer to that origin story? A stranger layer. One tucked right in between the circuit boards and soldering irons, where visions, rituals, acid trips, and metaphysical blueprints were just as vital as the actual code. Before Silicon Valley ever built machines, it was actually summoning something deep and a little mystical. Hey, seekers, and welcome to the Occulture Shock Podcast, Arcane Algorithms. Today, we're peeling back Silicon Valley's slick techie veneer to uncover its often unspoken, seriously spiritual genesis. To truly understand this, we got to jump back. Think Northern California in the 1960s and 70s. This wasn't just where the future engineers were tinkering. It was an absolute hotbed of esoteric and experimental thought. Now, this era was also defined by the widespread embrace of psychedelics like LSD, the rise of intentional communities and communes, and a flourishing new age spirituality. People weren't just looking for better gadgets at this point. They were actively searching for better ways of living, new ways of living, thinking and perceiving their reality. Layered on top of all of this was the pervasive influence of Cold War paranoia, which ironically fueled a fascination with cybernetics as a way to understand complex systems. And then alongside that, a huge interest in Eastern mysticism, in particular Zen Buddhism, offered frameworks for altered states of consciousness and how everything is interconnected. Now, this counterculture rejection of authority, this DIY ethos, this belief in individual empowerment, it didn't just show up in music or social movements. It wasn't just about hippies and Haight-Ashbury and psychedelic art. It was also about science and about technology, and it deeply seeped into the earliest stages of personal computing. The idea of taking powerful centralized machines and literally putting them into the hands of individuals, that was, for its time, a truly revolutionary, one might argue, spiritual act of democratization. As the legendary psychedelic advocate Timothy Leary famously put it, the personal computer is the LSD of the 1980s. Now, Leary totally understood that both were tools for mind expansion, for reshaping reality. And it's this very idea that leads us directly to one of the most pivotal figures in this story, Stewart Brand. So, who was Stewart Brand? He was a Stanford dropout, a former Army paratrooper, and he was deep into the Ken Kesey from When It Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest fame's Merry Pranksters group. Now, Brand wasn't just a tech enthusiast. He was a full-blown visionary. And like so many of his generation, his journey was profoundly shaped by his use of LSD. It was during one of his acid trips that Brand experienced a truly profound vision. He saw Earth from space, not as a bunch of separate countries, but as a single, interconnected, vulnerable system. This wasn't just an ecological awakening. It was a revelation of cosmic unity and understanding that everything was part of a larger living organism. This vision ended up fueling his entire life's work. In 1968, Brand ended up launching something groundbreaking. It was called the Whole Earth Catalog. Now, this wasn't your average mail order catalog. It was designed as a countercultural Bible, a grimoire for a new age. It offered access to tools, but not just your stereotypical hammers and tents. We're talking everything from books on cybernetics to meditation guides to alternative energy blueprints and even early software. The whole point was to empower individuals to build their own lives off the grid and connect with a larger holistic understanding of existence. And honestly, as with the way things are currently, I recommend maybe tracking down those books and learning from them. The catalog's motto, access to tools, became more than just its catchy tagline. It was essentially a spell for empowerment. It suggested that with the right information and the right mindset, people could truly transcend their limitations, augment their consciousness, and even reshape their reality. Now, these early ideas of augmented consciousness, fired up by psychedelics and a deep craving for interconnectedness, were the direct precursors to early internet culture and social networks. And no better was this mantle picked up and worked on than with the Homebrew Computer Club. From hippies to hackers, we've got the Homebrew Computer Club. Imagine this, right? Every Wednesday night in some sort of cramped garage or maybe an auditorium over in Stanford, about 30 people would cram into this space. Now, this was the Homebrew Computer Club. These folks weren't formal. They weren't corporate. They were just absolutely fascinated by these new personal computers and what they could possibly do. And here's where it gets really interesting. Within this seemingly purely technical gathering, the spiritual roots were still deeply intertwined. Take Steve Jobs, for instance. His fascination with technology was inseparable from his journey to India, his experiments with LSD, and his lifelong deep dive into Zen Buddhism. Jobs famously called LSD, quote, one of the 2 or 3 most important things, unquote, in his life, stating that it showed him, quote, that there's another side to the coin and you can't remember it when you come back, but you know it, unquote. Now, this relentless search for deeper understanding didn't just stay in their personal lives. It manifested directly into the design process. Many of these early computer pioneers would talk about hitting flow states. I call it gamer brain. You know, the kind of feeling where you're just deeply immersed. Time has no meaning anymore. It just totally disappears and you just feel like intuition is guiding you. That's what these people witnessed. They weren't just writing logical code. They felt like they were channeling something. And you can even spot it in the visual and almost spiritual design elements that somehow snuck into their work. Think about the early circuit boards, all those intricate and symmetrical patterns. If you look closely, they sometimes totally resemble mandalas or sacred geometry. It is not a stretch to see the pure, unbridled creativity of the LSD era influencing everything from the aesthetic of the machine to the user interface and the user experience. Literally the way that we interact with machines every day was potentially driven by drugs. So it really makes you wonder, were these simply brilliant engineers, or were they perhaps completely without realizing it, acting as conduits for something far older and way more esoteric? This whole idea of unconscious symbolism leads us right into the very logos and branding that basically define the entire tech world and how we are drawn and interact with it. Take a good look at some of the most iconic symbols of Silicon Valley today, and you just might start seeing echoes of something ancient. Let's hit arguably the most famous one, Apple's bitten apple logo. Is it a subtle tribute to Alan Turing, the brilliant father of AI who tragically died by a cyanide-laced apple? Maybe. Is it a direct biblical allegory, the forbidden fruit of knowledge from the tree of knowledge? Very possibly. The beauty of it is that the ambiguity just makes its symbolic power even stronger. Now let's move on to Oracle. Let's consider Oracle. I mean, just the name itself screams ancient Greek divination. The Oracle of Delphi, a source of profound, sometimes cryptic wisdom. A whole company built on knowing and providing answers named after a spiritual conduit of truth. It's pretty wild when you think about it. And what about modern logo minimalism? Just like the simplicity of it all. They're super sleek, simple designs. Are they just about looking cool, or do they function a lot like sigil magic? Simplified symbols charged with a specific intention, designed to bypass your conscious mind and implant a concept directly into your collective unconscious. Think about it. A simple abstract swoosh or a stylized G that instantly triggers powerful recognition and brand loyalty. That's some serious magic, whether it's intended or not. It's genuinely fascinating, honestly, to consider that engineers who we typically see or think of as purely rational and very scientific, logical beings, they might actually be acting as unintentional magicians, invoking deep archetypes and imbuing their creations with all these layers of symbolic meaning, whether they even mean to or not. So, with that being said then, are these just coincidences? Are they archetypes, or both, or neither, and just happy accidents? Perhaps the human mind, at its deepest level, is always trying to make sense of things and pulls from these shared ancient wells of consciousness. It taps into patterns, otherworldly patterns that exist throughout existence, kind of like the matrix. And that, my friends, leads us right to the very nature of reality itself and how some of today's tech leaders are openly embracing ancient spiritual concepts. Some of the most influential figures in tech seriously are arguing that we might be living in a simulated reality. This isn't just something from a sci-fi movie anymore. It's actually something being legitimately scientifically looked at and considered. And here's where it gets really trippy. It has a striking, undeniable parallel with Gnosticism, an ancient religious and philosophical movement. Now, the Gnostics believed that our material world wasn't created by some sort of perfect benevolent God, but by a lesser, flawed deity, often called the demiurge, basically a kind of a clumsy, malevolent, ego-driven creator god. Humanity's big goal in Gnosticism is to try and escape this imperfect material prison through gnosis, a secret, intuitive knowledge or enlightenment. Now think about that for a second. If we're in a simulation, the programmer is therefore the demiurge, right? And our relentless quest for higher consciousness, for our deeper understanding through technology, suddenly looks a whole lot like a modern quest for gnosis, a way to crack the code and escape the binds of this digital prison that we might be in. Legendary author Philip K. Dick was all over this particular concept. His novel Valis describes a divine intrusion into simulated timelines, a super intelligent alien information system that communicates through cryptic symbols. His work brilliantly blurs the lines between mental illness, spiritual awakening, and the terrifying possibility of being part of a simulated reality. And now, with the rise of AI, we're literally creating our own digital golems, intelligent beings built from pure data. Could these AI models become our new demiurgic beings, capable of creating their own mini realities within their digital world? Are we their demiurge? For many in tech, technology isn't just a tool. It is seen as a potential path to transcend the flawed material plane, whether it is uploading consciousness to live forever, a type of a way to achieve digital immortality. The core drive is always to escape the limitations of the physical world. And that, my friends, deeply echoes the ancient Gnostic yearning for liberation from the material through knowledge. Let's push this idea even further. Not so heady. Let's go a little more ground level with it. If these are the philosophical underpinnings, what about the actual daily practical practice of building this stuff? Consider code as incantation. Source code written in these highly specific languages filled with precise syntax and structured logic act a lot like a series of commands designed to make something happen. A programmer types lines of code, they hit compile, and suddenly a complex digital system springs to being. Isn't that, in a way, a form of ritual? A super precise sequence of actions intended to manifest a very specific outcome. So from psychedelic-infused visions of Stuart Brand to the Zen-inspired minimalism of Steve Jobs, from the surprising biblical allusions in iconic tech logos to the Gnostic echoes in today's wild simulation theories, one thing is clear: the spiritual undercurrent of technology has always been there, because at its core, the human quest for transcendence, for control, for immortality, for meaning, none of that is new. It is the oldest quest in the book, etched into the very core of human consciousness. And technology, when you look at it that way, isn't just a collection of tools. It's just the latest update in that ancient drive. What if the singularity is the rapture with really good branding? That's all for this episode of the Occulture Shock Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Chobot. If you're looking for more Occulture Shock content or would like to support the show, join us over at Patreon at patreon.com/Occulture Shock Podcast. Until next time, thanks for getting weird with us.